That's better. We've got a couple of dozen people here this evening. I'm Margaret Holm with First Things First. This is our 9th deep dive that we've done, trying to keep on a discussion series, even though we are in these COVID times. So hopefully we'll be meeting face-to-face soon, but possibly we'll continue this deep dive series because it is convenient to be able to stay at home on a rainy night like tonight and still participate in a climate discussion. Let's begin by appreciating that we live in the beautiful Okanagan Valley, the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. This valley is also a very arid and sensitive area. We had a lot of fires this year, and wildlife is a worry for us, how they're coping, because this is home to 1/3 of Canada's species and habitats at risk. So we do live in a very special area here in the Okanagan. We've spoken a couple of times about a land restoration project on the Penticton Indian Reserve, where a natural floodplain is being reconnected to the Okanagan River Channel. It's creating habitat for young salmon, for birds, for amphibians. This Cassian project is creating important riparian habitat that is actually part of the future climate resilience of our community. By absorbing floodwaters, this new area that's instead of just having the straight concrete channel river, we have a new area that can be flooded annually in the spring and fall as needed. It also increases wildlife habitat, and it increases access to Indigenous foods, medicines, and natural material used by the Syilx people. Maybe you've been watching the progress as you walk down the channel. You can see people planting and weeding. They started, I believe, a year ago. Lori is going to put a notice on the screen because the eco community staff would like to invite people to come down and volunteer. You can see highlighted in yellow for the next 4 Fridays and 3 Saturdays, they are looking for help. And they said, whether you've got an hour or 5 hours, they'd love to have you down there. We're going to put a link in the chat to the full information about the volunteer project. And I was actually down there yesterday with a friend who said, oh, I've got a bad back. And they said, oh, no problem. You know, we've got, you can just sprinkle seeds or you can just gather rose hips. So no matter if you've got a sore hand or a bad back or whatever, they'll have a role for you. So I encourage you to get involved in a local restoration project that's also very important for climate action here in the valley. But let's get back to a deep dive. These discussions are hosted by First Things First Okanagan. We're a 6-year-old organization, we're a nonprofit society, and our mission is to promote awareness of climate change and work to find solutions for a better future for our communities. We want you all to join us in our endeavors. We work on education, events, communication. We have a political action committee. We welcome anyone who would like to join us in our activities. Tonight's deep dive, if you have any ideas for things you'd like to have discussions about, please write it in chat or get a hold of us through our website or our info email. Tonight's session is being recorded and it's going to be posted on our private YouTube channel, and you'll be sent a link to it later if you'd like to watch it again, or maybe you want to tell a friend about it. Tonight's session is the technical side of it is being looked after by Lori Goldman, who's behind the controls. She has a survey for us later this evening. She's part of the deep dive team, as is Sue Kirschman. Sue is going to be introducing tonight's speaker, and I'm going to turn things over to her now.
Thanks, Margaret. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you again. And to those people who we haven't seen before, nice to meet you. Many of you have probably heard of COP26, which has been in the news lately as it starts tomorrow. COP26 is the United Nations 26th Annual Climate Conference. where almost 200 countries from around the world sit down to negotiate environmental goals for the planet. Each country sets its level of ambition. For example, our federal government has committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. Canada's climate plan is called A Healthy Environment and a Healthy Economy, sets out federal policies, programs, and investments to achieve this emissions reduction target. Each province also has its own climate action plan that it implements through provincial policies and with provincial dollars. And you might have heard on Monday that the BC government released an update to its Clean BC climate plan, and they've called it the Roadmap to 2030. It's worth a look if you have a bit of time. I'm mentioning COP's international goals and the federal and provincial plans because they form the backdrop for climate action at the community level. Municipal governments can only influence the emissions that their communities produce with the funds and the legislative tools that they have. And Laurie, if you could just bring up that figure from page 9 of the plan. I hope everyone can see it. And you'll probably recognize it as it was part of the pre-reading homework that we gave to you. So the middle boxes show where local emissions come from. On the left are the territorial emissions from buildings, homes, vehicles, and landfill waste that are within the geographic boundaries of the community. And on the right in the middle are the what they have called consumptive emissions. So what we buy, travel, etc., that are not obviously in the control of the city. This figure also differentiates between emissions that are in Penticton's new plan and those that are outside the scope of the plan. Community emissions, which are in the box at the bottom left, are what this plan is all about. Adaptation isn't part of the plan, that's the box at the top right, and nor are corporate emissions, which would be a separate plan. I hope all that's clear, but if not, I'm sure it will become clear as David speaks. So I'm pleased now to introduce David, our guest speaker. David Cassian is the City of Penticton's Community Sustainability Coordinator. And some of you might remember him from our deep dive last January when he spoke about buildings and energy. If you have any questions for David during his presentation, just enter them into the chat and we'll be having a little question period afterwards. So welcome, David. We really appreciate you being here tonight, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sue. Thank you as well. The First Things First Okanagan. I always enjoy attending these deep dive series. You have some great guests and some great topics, so we can dive right in. I'm going to present tonight on Penticton's new Community Climate Action Plan as part of the deep dive series. So I'll share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the title screen there for the Climate Action Plan? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Sorry. Okay, perfect. So I'll run through a quick agenda. Tonight we'll talk about how we develop the Community Climate Action Plan, what our current emissions are and where we're projected to go, what the community vision was to help guide the plan, the 6 big moves that are available to local governments, full implementation and what the modeling will look like, and our next steps. So what is a Community Climate Action Plan? A Community Climate Action Plan, you might also hear me say the word CCAP, is a plan to use local government powers to save residents and businesses energy, emissions, and money. It's one part of the broader local government action, and other tools include, as Sue mentioned, a corporate energy and emissions plan that we're working on in tandem with this plan, as well as adaptation plans or equivalent. So oftentimes you will see those plans working together. The city and the Community Energy Association are currently drafting a corporate plan that we're going to take forward to council later this year. The city has an existing community climate action plan from 2011, but many of the objectives in the original plan had been achieved. Largely missing from that plan were actions focused on electric vehicles and electric vehicle use, which had not yet taken off at the time the plan had been written. To stay current, it is recommended that municipalities update their climate action plans every 5 years. Having a climate action plan in place is a legislated requirement for municipalities in British Columbia, and Penticton is a signatory member of the Climate Action Charter. Under this charter, local governments commit to becoming carbon neutral in their corporate operations, measuring and reporting the community's greenhouse gas emissions, and to create complete, compact, and more energy efficient communities. So the true purpose of a climate action plan is to guide council and staff on how to most effectively identify and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings, transportation, and solid waste. The climate action plan has strategies with unique actions, an implementation strategy with approximate costs and timelines, as well as responsible staff and departments. This ensures that we are focusing our resources on tackling emission sources that matter the most. Having a climate action plan in place also helps to make the city look more favorable in grant funding applications. There are many benefits to having a climate action plan, and by doing so will contribute to positive outcomes for the environment, social, and economic spheres. Work on the 2021 climate action plan began in early January of this year. Through a competitive RFP process, the Community Energy Association was brought on to assist with developing the plan. The first stage of the process was modeling and analysis. Here we reviewed and analyzed community energy use and emissions in relation to a baseline year of 2007. The impact of past initiatives that have lowered greenhouse gas emissions was also modeled, as well as business as usual projections. So we had a couple public engagement sessions. First was the spring engagement session. There were 2 dedicated stakeholder workshops, and this was to gather feedback on actions and strategies that will lower community-based emissions. For the fall engagement session, we had a total of 3 different community surveys that combined had over 500 responses. It was a very, very well, well participated in public engagement session, and we were very happy with that high number of responses. There was also a questionnaire and climate action package that was sent to schools. And the students were very keen on this, and the questionnaire received over 500 responses from 25 different classrooms, and just really helped us identify that climate action is really important to youth just as much as it is, or even more so, to the rest of the community. So once we finished the fall public engagement campaign, recommended actions and a draft plan was finalized. The draft actions and recommended targets were based on engagement, modeling, and analysis. So during the spring stakeholder workshop, participants were asked to perform a backcasting exercise in which they envisioned a zero emission Penticton in 2040 and how we got there. So participants envisioned a Penticton that had clean air and water, that was a complete compact community that had thriving natural spaces, a community where people walk or ride their bicycles to work and to amenities. The Penticton of 2040 has energy efficient homes with low embodied carbon, homes that divert their food scraps and yard waste to a compost site or to a renewable natural gas facility. Gone are the sounds of combustion motors, replaced instead by the hum of electric bikes and scooters. We can definitely get there, but it will take a lot of work. So now we get into some of the fun stuff. Understanding where we started from is just as important as knowing where we want to get to. On this slide is a breakdown of energy, emissions, and costs for 2018, and this is all on the community scale for Penticton. And these are related to transportation, buildings, and solid waste. So you'll see that passenger vehicles account for the greatest proportion of energy, emissions, and energy costs. When combined with commercial vehicles, transportation as a whole accounts for over half of our emissions in Penticton. They account for about 55% of our emissions. Residential and commercial, small, medium industrial buildings account for about 15% of emissions each, and waste is 14% of our community emissions. In 2018, the community spent a little over $136 million on energy. So that includes energy used to heat and cool our buildings, energy used to drive our vehicles. Since Penticton operates its own electric utility, a large portion of the $52 million on electrical expenditures does get circulated back into the community. So the Climate Action Plan outlines a pathway towards Penticton's low carbon vision and emissions reduction target of 40% below 2007 levels by 2030. So this puts us in line as well with the most recent targets set by the various levels of government. The two graphs on the slide compare the business as usual scenario with the fully implemented plan scenario. So the graph on your left is if we were, as a city, to not be proactive about emissions reductions and to just let the province and the federal government put in place actions that will lower emissions. So one example of a federal government and provincial government initiative is the zero emission vehicle targets. And that's where you see on the left graph, big emissions reduction. Switching over to the graph on the right-hand side, you will see where our emissions will trend to if we are to fully implement the actions in this plan. So we can come back to this slide later. There might be some questions on this slide here. But if we are to fully implement the actions in this plan, we can meet the recommended target by 2040. And then 2040 and beyond, we would have some more work to do. So again, let me know and we can come back to this slide later. Okay. So in order to lower emissions, we have 6 big moves or 6 categories that we can tackle. So this addresses the way we move, where we live and work, and what we do with waste. These are considered big moves because they tackle the biggest source of community emissions. Importantly for this plan, they are also most in control of local governments. So again, on this plan, we focused on what we can do with the tools we have as a municipal government. And it generated these 6 primary moves. So each big move has a vision and objectives, as well as specific actions that the city can take to lay the foundation for individuals and businesses to make cleaner choices. The 6 big moves focus on transportation, buildings, and waste. For transportation, which is the greatest source of Penticton's emissions, the big moves are centered on shifting beyond the car and into transit or active transportation. Active transportation are things like cycling and walking, riding e-bikes and e-scooters, electrifying passenger transportation, and decarbonizing commercial transportation. The big moves related to buildings are centered on making more energy efficient homes through the BC Energy Step Code and heating new homes with electricity instead of natural gas, and decarbonizing existing buildings through fuel switching and deep energy retrofits. A component of the Climate Action Plan that has not yet been completed is a home energy retrofit strategy that we'll be excited to share with First Things First early next year. For waste, the big move is closing the loop on waste by diverting organics and capturing value from them. Capturing value from waste is focused on diverting organics to compost facilities or for creating renewable natural gas. Helping residents understand how to minimize food waste is critical as well, and is the second most effective method to lowering greenhouse gases, according to the book Drawdown. From the 6 big moves, the greatest source of yearly emissions reductions comes from closing the loop on waste at a little over 20,000 tons per year. Next is followed by retrofitting existing buildings, which is a little over 17,000 tons of greenhouse gases saved per year, and electrifying passenger transportation at nearly 15,000 tons. So now we just pulled an excerpt of the plan just to give a little more of an idea of what those specific strategies and actions look like. So there are 3 strategies and 5 unique actions under the electrifying passenger transportation big move. So these actions range from implementing a public EV charging network to requiring EV charging in new builds, as well as in existing multifamily and commercial properties. The current state of electric vehicle charging takes on a mix of using public or private charging infrastructure, as well as at-home charging. And this plan encourages increasing access to both methods. It's important to EV owners that they not experience what's called range anxiety, and to know that at home or in the community that they live in or are visiting, they can safely charge their electric vehicles. Increasing the amount of electric vehicles on the streets can also be done through education and outreach. Organizing events such as First Things First Energy Expo, where people are introduced to new electric technologies across a broad spectrum, also helps to remove barriers to EV adoption. On the right-hand side of the table, you'll see that there are columns for levers, time, and cost. So levers are levers are actions that can be implemented through infrastructure. So that's with the wrench and screwdriver there, such as Electrify 1.1. The levers can be policy and regulation, such as 2.1, and through engagement and outreach, as in 3.1 and 3.2. Also included are approximate cost ranges and timescales for implementation. And we have this for each of the big moves. There's a similar breakdown to this that you can see in the Climate Action Plan. So on the discussion of modeling and understanding how the actions that we implement will lead to measurable greenhouse gas reductions, there were some assumptions being made. So the table on this side displays those assumptions made during the modeling exercise that formed each of the greenhouse gas reduction estimates for the big moves. So for example, if we look near the top, it is assumed that 3% of homes in Penticton will be retrofitted or upgraded each year. And each of those homes will have approximately a 33% energy reduction as a result of that retrofit. An example from Shift Beyond the Car is that the actions will take up to 20 years for full implementation, and vehicle kilometers traveled, or that VKT language, will be reduced by 17%. So of the 17% reduction in vehicle kilometers traveled, 40% of that reduction will be attributed to active transportation, walking, cycling. 40% reduction will come from transit use, and the remaining 20% reductions will come to good land use planning, going back to that complete compact community. So the folks at the Community Energy Association, a fellow named Greg Dong, took charge of the modeling and analysis. That was a big portion of the work that the CEA did, as well as all the assumptions behind the math. And so if there's any technical questions in this presentation, some that I can't answer, we'll definitely follow up with the folks at the CEA, because they are definitely an expert in the modeling and analysis portion of the plan writing. So we know what we've done to date. What are our next steps? Staff and members of the Community Energy Association will be presenting to Council at the November 16th meeting, and we will be going for adoption into the records. There are 3 outstanding appendices that will be added to the Climate Action Plan in 2022. The reason that we're adding these appendices in 2022 is we were able to secure a little over $45,000 in additional funding this year, partially through Fortis BC and partially through Fraser Basin Council and their Emotive program. And so we were able to put additional resources to really focus on these very important appendices, which are almost going to be kind of sub-plans, sub-rollouts to this plan. So one is on urban tree canopy recommendations, which is a big focus of the Parks Department right now. Another will be on electric and active mobility recommendations. And the third will be a home energy retrofit strategy recommendations as well. So we're very excited. We will be bringing those 3 appendices to Council next year and get them to adopt those for addition into the Community Climate Action Plan that we've put together now. So that concludes my presentation on Penticton's new Climate Action Plan. And I just wanted to quickly say thank you to First Things First for inviting me here tonight to share our experience and where we're headed. It was a busy year, but it was a big year for climate action here. So I'll now turn the mic back over to Sue, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
I see that there aren't any questions in the chat, and so I wonder, Lori, if you could switch to just full screen where we can see almost everyone in the discussion tonight, and perhaps we could ask people to use the, I will look at chat, but also to use the reaction to put their hand up. I'm going to take advantage of being one of the moderators to start our first question, and that is, David, this is a very exciting plan, but a very big plan. And I can imagine this is going on in cities all around British Columbia. Some of the funding that I know you've received through the government has been cut off, and they haven't announced new funding. I can imagine this is going to cost a lot in terms of staffing resources. Is there a plan to ramp up the staffing you're going to need in planning, in figuring out all the retrofitting, all that sort of thing? Is there a corporate plan for the additional staff you'll need?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. So one of the recommendations in the plan was to bring on an additional staff member, specifically a zero waste coordinator or equivalent. So a little bit about my role here at the city is I'm the sustainability coordinator, but I really have two large roles. I focus one on corporate and community sustainability, so the climate action plan work, being the liaison to our sustainability committee. And the other half of my desk is focused on solid waste. So recycling compliance, landfill composting, our residential collection program. So in looking at those big moves, one of the greatest big moves was reducing, both reducing food waste and diverting food waste to either a compost facility or renewable natural gas facility. So one of the recommendations is that we hire a zero waste coordinator or equivalent. And that way, the existing role of the sustainability coordinator would be more focused full-time on sustainability. And then a new position would come in to manage both our waste collection program and those existing solid waste components in place, but then to also implement a lot of the closing the loop big moves of the climate action plans as well. As part of the plan as well, so Margaret briefly alluded to the cancellation of funding. So what that was there was a climate action revenue incentive program where municipalities reported on things like fuel use, their corporate greenhouse gas emissions, and we received approximately $55,000 a year that was put into a climate action reserve. So that plan, that funding was canceled at the provincial level to all municipalities in British Columbia, with no word on where they're going next or how they will assist municipalities to continue to fund climate action. So a component of the plan, one of the, I think, believes the last appendix in the plan, is considerations for how to finance that with our own money. So, for example, one of the financial components we will bring forward to council next year is a surplus revenue. So at the end of the year, if there is still surplus, then a percentage of that would go into a climate reserve or equivalent. Now that the new BC climate roadmap has come out, they have also alluded to new funding sources, but unfortunately at this time, it's nothing concrete that we can rely on. So we do have a healthy reserve that will be able to fund a lot of these actions in the short term, but we will definitely have to get creative and also really work with what's in the plan to boost the funding towards climate action as well.
Okay, there actually are a number of good questions coming in chat, so I think I'll just go to some of them. Robin asks, she said that the plan is a good start, but a lot of things that are happening are outside of Penticton's control. Is the city thinking about enhancing community resilience for the inevitable shocks that will come? Now, I'm not sure if these are things like flood and fire, if Robin's speaking about, but is the city also looking at the bigger picture forces that are at work in our province?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for that question, Robin. One thing that naturally comes after a climate action plan is a resiliency and or adaptation plan as well, and those often work in tandem. You know, this most recent summer has taught us that climate is changing at home with fires and drought, and so we do have a lot of different departments that are doing very proactive things for mitigation and resilience. We've got work happening on Penticton Creek, naturalizing that. We've got a lot of resources going to fire mitigation in the city as well as drought management. But at this time, right now we don't have any concrete plans in place to tackle that head on, at least off my desk that I can say.
Great. Thank you. Jim asks, he notices that the plan states that 32% of emissions are coming from buildings, and the majority of that is from use of natural gas. And then looking at some of your assumptions, there was only 50% of new homes that were moving away from natural gas use. So isn't there a problem then of, shouldn't we be looking at increasing that move away from natural gas to lower our emissions?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. When you look at the breakdown of emissions, it's with our very clean hydro-generated electricity in BC, it sure shows us that natural gas is a very greenhouse gas intense way to heat our homes and our businesses. And so in the big moves for building new buildings and retrofitting existing, we need to find a way to incentivize homeowners to switch to electricity, to switch to things like heat pumps instead of going back to that same natural gas furnace that they've already had. And there's a lot of great programs through the province, rebates and incentives for switching to heat pumps. And so identifying those rebates and building on those to further give homeowners that incentive to make the change is going to be critical over the next few years. And we can all hold our breath and kind of wait for renewable natural gas, but switching to electricity as well will really help to lower those emissions right off the bat.
Thank you. So Avril asks an interesting question I've been wondering about, and that's for people living in apartments and strata complexes. How are they going to be doing retrofits and things like EV installation for existing buildings where ownership is maybe there's a landlord as well or a strata?
Yeah, so thanks, Avril. That's a really challenging issue right now, is retrofitting existing apartment buildings or even strata complexes to accommodate electric vehicles. And there's a lot of great foundations that have been laid on the coast, especially New Westminster, where the municipalities are assisting both with expertise and money to help these apartment buildings and either stratas or privately owned buildings to switch to retrofit to accommodate EVs. Also, what you'll see a goal over the next short term is for new builds that come online, both single family homes and apartments. You will see that being a requirement of the new build as well. For waste initiatives, we're certainly getting creative. I really like what the city of Vernon is doing right now. They have centralized compost drop-offs throughout their community, where anyone in a strata building, in an apartment building or a single family home can bring a bucket of food waste and drop it off and it gets composted. So we've been chatting a bit with the city of Vernon on their experience with that, because although the regional district right now is in the process of designing and building a compost site, I think there are some things we can do in the short term as well that would address both single family homes and apartments, because we have a lot of people that live in stratas, and so they need access to those facilities as well.
That's very exciting to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people, when looking at a climate plan, might expect to have more information or more encouragement of solar power, and solar isn't really part of this plan. Is there, this is a question from Philip. He's wondering why there isn't more mention of solar. Yeah,
thank you, Philip. That was a great point to pick out. The struggle in BC, renewable energy is excellent because it creates a more resilient community that's not as reliant on the grid, be it a community scale or even at an individual scale. But one of the challenges we face in British Columbia is we have an electricity source that is very, very low emission. And so the focus of the plan, kind of as Jim pointed out, is more so to get people to use less power, less electricity and natural gas, and to switch people from gas to electricity rather than to produce energy. So say we were living in Alberta, where the emissions factor of electricity is about, I think, 800 times higher than ours. there's a big incentive to put solar panels up because it has such a low emissions factor. But I hope I'm explaining this okay. You know, solar panel and hydros are almost identical. So if we're really going to take a chunk out of emissions, then we need to get people off gas and to use less power. Also, maybe something we could have highlighted better in the plans is we do have a net metering program at the city. So if you do produce more power than you use, there are financial incentives to that. And then we do have loan applications in place where you can borrow a certain amount of money to put panels on your home from the city at a pretty low interest rate as well.
Janelle is asking about industrial composting. I think you've already talked about the fact that there are big plans for a better facility. She asks whether methane might be captured from that facility.
Yeah, sure. So a quick update is the regional district, they purchased a property very close to the landfill towards Naramata, Campbell Mountain landfill. And they're in the process of, they've applied to the Agricultural Land Reserve to get that property removed from the ALR so that they can build a commercial in-vessel compost facility that would handle food waste from the region, as well as biosolids or sewer residuals from the region as well. It would be a mirrored site, so the two waste streams wouldn't get mixed, they would be composted separately. So that's at the regional district level. I know they've been in talks with various agencies about capturing some of the gas from that, but we have to wait till they get a little further down the road. But that's certainly something that that they've looked at the regional level.
We're peppering you with questions. Well, maybe just to have a couple
That's okay.
more.
It keeps me on my toes.
Here's a little bit of a different question about refrigerants used in all the big grocery stores. We've been told that these refrigerants are a top emitter. And so is there any thought to working with grocery store owners on some of the ways they can lower emissions in their commercial operations, in particular these big open refrigerators that we have in all of our huge grocery chains?
Yeah, you know, that was a big surprise in reading Drawdown, that the #1 method to lower global greenhouse gas emissions was to, I believe it was upgrade the type of refrigerant most commonly used. You know, that would be really innovative at a community scale. I'm not sure of any communities that do work with like local businesses on their refrigerant systems, but you know, that's certainly a very interesting topic that I would love to know more about. Yeah.
David, if people have, we've given people the link to read this new climate plan. If they have questions for you, can they contact you at the city to answer questions?
Yes, of course. Feel free to if you do a wrap-up email or something, to put my my city email address in there for sure. Yeah.
That would be great, because some of the other solutions people are looking at are things like that would come under planning, like building lots using permeable pavement, allowing for better drainage, using landscaping, things like swale gardens, so that we're sort of doing better flood protection, but also at the same time handling rainwater better. So these all come under planning, I guess. And people could, I think, take a good look at the plan, and if there are things in there that you think should be there, send those comments to the city. I thank you very much for presenting the plan and answering our questions. I think I've kind of gone through, there's one person that had a particular issue to do with tree canopy on a lot that I think the city's selling, but I think that's maybe best addressed by a planner perhaps. Lori has her hand up. Go ahead, Lori.
Thank you. I did notice that in the plan it says to encourage developers to install EV charging facilities, but you said that at some point it's going to possibly be required, but it's not in the plan. So how does that work?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. So there's a couple communities, Nelson, I believe New Westminster, and possibly another, that have it as a requirement for single family homes, for small commercial and multifamily to install EV chargers at the time as part of their building permit. And that's the route that I will be taking to council as well. I can't say if it will be in 2022 or early 2023. It will require a lot of work with the building department, but you know, it's much cheaper. So for a single family home, the city of Nelson, the report they put together, they figure it's an extra $200 to $300 at time of construction to put in the requirements to charge an EV either in your garage or in your driveway, versus, you know, up to several thousand after it's built. So, you know, it's not going to be a big burden on the development community to put in those requirements at the time of construction versus, you know, going back after the fact and trying to do it later.
And I think I'll take the liberty again of asking the last question, and that is, municipalities in British Columbia have been given a big task to do. Do you feel that do municipalities feel that they have the legislative tools to be able to successfully get to their targets? For instance, are there additional tools in planning or in legislation that if you had them, you could perhaps lower emissions more? Is this something that you're working with the provincial government for? Or do you feel you have all the tools you need?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. So, you know, these plans were constricted by the tools that we had available. And, you know, there have been some big developments on the legislation side, but, you know, most recent example is when they updated the community charter recently to allow municipalities to ban single-use plastics, but municipalities aren't able to make bylaws that affect the environment. And that will always be a limiting factor for municipalities if we can't enact a bylaw that will protect the environment. And that was what happened with Victoria. That's a whole different probably topic for a deep dive, but they banned plastics and it was found to be in contravention of the community charter, and they went through a lengthy court appeal that they lost. But as a result, the province did see that municipalities do need more resources and power over things that do benefit the natural environment. So, you know, I feel really positive about the tools that we do have. I think most worrisome was the cancellation of that annual funding. I think that is most worrisome from a municipal's perspective, as these ambitious targets are being set by provincial, federal, and international bodies, losing, you know, some of that financial assistance, is worrisome. But I'm being optimistic in that part of this clean roadmap to 2030 will include some cash to help the little guys get through this, and to not, you know, force a municipality to put the cost of climate action solely on the taxpayer or on the utility, but also to come from a provincial or federal body as well. So,
right, thank you, David. We're going to do some polling to get an idea of what people are thinking of doing in their own lives, and then what the barriers are. So you're welcome to stick around.
sure.
And then there'll be some discussion of that as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
We'll also save the chat for you, and you'll see some additional questions there that we didn't have a chance to get to today. Lori, are you ready to start those polls? Okay, first one is reducing emission in the next 5 years. Are you planning to do any of the following things? So just tick all of them that you think you will be doing.
While people are doing that, Cameron asked a question that I wonder if David might be able to address. It's in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, David.
Oh, sure. So, yeah. So, sorry, Margaret. Cam's question was: is Penticton joining the local government retrofit peer network? Is that the network through FCM? Because I recently applied to join a number of networks through FCM, and I believe that was one of them, as well as there was an EV peer network as well.
Okay, thank you. people are still doing the polls, so I still have numbers coming in.
Well, I'll ask a question that was in the chat, and that is, are local governments working together on some of these solutions? David, is there, do you have, we heard about this retrofit network. Are there other networks where you can work on similar solutions?
Yeah, definitely. So we're part of the, I've been active member of the EV network, EV peer network, which is a group of just, sustainability coordinators from different municipalities or the province. And as well, I've been working with the Community Energy Association, and those folks have written dozens and dozens of plans. Most recently, they wrote Summerland's Community Energy and Emission Reductions Plan. And so definitely there's a lot of collaboration in between local governments and reviewing other plans and just kind of making sure we're up to date and we're not missing other things that other municipalities have thought of.
Great, thanks. And we do have a comment on the poll, which is true. Some people may already have been spending a few years getting some of these things done, and we didn't have a way to indicate if you've done that. So Janelle has just ticked a few boxes of things that have already been accomplished in her household. Are we ready for the poll, Lori?
Yep.
Okay, let's see.
Can
All
you see?
right. So 25% of people plan to get an energy audit. The highest is 60% of people plan to get an electric car. Also high are renovation, converting their home heating, make an effort to walk or ride a bike for errands, use public transit more is 30%. Other things, did people fill in things in other? I'm not sure. I don't think I can see them. So yeah, they're all, we don't see any higher than 60%, but quite a few people are planning to do renovations. Interesting that only 25% of the people aren't going to do, or only 25% want to do an audit. I hope people realize that in order to get a lot of the rebates, you do actually have to have done the audit first. So just a little note on that. And in Deep Dive, we do plan to do a session on what happens during a home energy audit and what's involved. And we're also going to do session on converting to heat pumps. So those are probably our next two deep dives, are tackling those projects. Are we ready for the next poll? Go ahead, Lily.
I'll try anyway. This is only the second time I've done another poll, so let's see if it works. Can you see it?
Barriers to making change. What are barriers to taking action? And please check all that apply.
Yeah, I put in the question, can't understand the energy audit, because that was relevant for me. And David, thank you, helped me to understand the audit, because for some of us, having the audit was easy and getting that great report was really exciting, but then it was really difficult for me to decipher it. So I see nobody's really choosing that, but you know, the thing about only some people choosing the public transit, our public transit isn't really very user friendly for a lot of people. Like it doesn't run in the evening. And so without that real piece of the city getting like little minibuses going around to service areas of town, it's hard to choose public transit for some people.
Very good point. Are we ready for the results of the second survey yet?
Yes, we are. Here you go.
All right.
Can you see them?
Yes. So number of people, almost 50%, well, over 50% lack funds, and almost 50% have to do other upgrades before upgrading electricity, I guess, before they can consider some of the other options like heat pumps. So those are definite barriers. And I do note that, of course, a lot of these things do fall on the homeowner to do, buying a car, doing the retrofits, that sort of thing. Additional upgrades needed before I can install a heat pump, 38%. Hard to find help to do home renovations, 43%, that's quite high. So that is true with so much big building going on. Who's going to come and do a job where they might just make a couple $1,000s? Good help is hard to get. So I hope you'll note those, David, and it's your job to find solutions to those. So Lori, maybe we could just see everybody.
I think that's in your view.
Okay, that's in me. All right.
I think it's your view. I do have a question though. With this barriers to making change, 14% of our people said other. I wonder if they might speak to what would be the other barriers that they would have. Maybe they could share that if they would like to.
We also just have 10 or 15 minutes left. I thought we might have some general discussion. So if people want to turn their videos back on so we can see each other, feel free to do so. But yes, if anyone wants to add any comments about barriers to change, feel free to put your hand up. So Avril saying she's living in a strata with council rules, and that's why she marked other. Yeah, good point. Those. And Kadi is saying we were told the house couldn't get by with just heat pumps, so they have an alternate source of heat. Certainly, yeah, some people have a backup. And someone else is saying they've watched a good session on retrofits, and certainly I think it's important for us to have at least one session on heat pump retrofits. I tried to do it myself, my husband and I, and we ran into all kinds of problems because we're in an older house that needs a lot of upgrading. So it's going to end up costing a considerable amount of money. So yeah, it's not easy. It needs a lot of investigation. And I've heard David talk about the fact that we need skilled tradespeople as well. We don't necessarily have everyone that knows how to do this new technology. The last question I'd like to ask people, and just have you unmute and raise your hand, and that is the vision that David presented of what Penticton could be like. A compact community with very little sound and noise from vehicles. That vision was really compelling to me, and to imagine that it could be that way in my lifetime was very exciting. On the other hand, it's very daunting that we can get all this done. How do other folks feel about it? Anyone want to comment?
I can hardly wait.
Okay. I see Britta taking hers. Go ahead, Britta.
Just add changing those leaf blowers and those things also to electric will make like the sound pollution go away. Just add that to that beautiful image of where we'll go, you know. I know, agreed. And having people be really using those nice bike paths that they've started to build in Penticton. I'm not seeing a whole lot of people on there, and just encouraging that whole business and learning how to ride bikes. You know, I've been we lived 1 year over in Austria, and the children there in grade 5 learn bicycle safety, you know, how to interface with, like everybody learns bicycle traffic safety. So they're not just here It's just ride your bike whichever way you want, just wear a helmet or whatever. And it's a little bit wild. And there they know what the rules are. And therefore, when they become car drivers, they also know what the rules are. But I think a little bit of that would also help just on the real basic family level to make you feel safe if you're going to let your kid go ride the bike to school, right? That everybody sort of knows those rules.
Yeah, we have a bicycle safety village actually in town, and maybe it's
We
time
do.
for the adults, for the adults to go there as well. Thank you, Britta.
Yeah, but I think it should really literally be expanded. I know it was a treat for our kids when, you know, to go there, but it's just a little workshop instead of it be, they have license, like they get bicycle driver's licenses. Do you know what I mean?
Thanks,
So,
Britta.
yeah.
Anybody else want to add any comments about the larger vision of what Penticton could be like? with this?
Avril has her hand up.
Avril?
There, I'm unmuted now. I want to thank you, David, and certainly first things first, Okanagan. It has been really inspirational to me and to my partner to move here to Penticton. And what I hear in my limited experience is a degree of interactivity with the community and collaboration that exceeds what I had experienced in the past. So I'm really, really thankful for that, and encourage the continuance. And what Britta suggested there is so much of what you talk about can only be realized with stronger communication and a real desire to bring everyone into the plan and not just the people who are informed and so on. And so that depends so much on how the city will choose to interact with its citizens and communicate the plan and so on. I mean, one of the things we're struck by is such beautiful bike lanes, and yet we constantly as pedestrians have bicycles coming up against us on Main Street when we walk along the sidewalk, you know, and so it's so much depends on communication. And I guess one has to reserve some of the judgment on this particular climate action plan until what we see really comes out of COP26. I just feel that so much of what we have to deal with is global in nature, though I really love doing the deep dive in the small communities too. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Avril. And David, maybe we should end by asking you how we as citizens can help you and the city as this plan is rolled out.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take the quick sec to plug our engagement website. I'm not sure if everyone here is aware of that, but it's shapeyourcitypenticton.ca. And that's just a great way to stay in tune with all the big projects that we're working on and to provide your feedback and your voice. You know, every big project we do always has an engagement component, as they should. And so, you know, those are great opportunities, whether it's on bike lanes or building bylaws, to just let us know what's important to you and what matters. We also have an excellent committee that you know, is keeping us on track as well for implementing these climate plans. So I'm just excited for a new funding cycle next year and for these plans to be adopted, and for the community to hold us to implementing these plans.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And thank you very much for spending your evening with us tonight. As mentioned, I hope you all get the First Things First newsletter. If not, you can type your name into chat and we'll add you. But we are actively planning our next 2 deep dives, which are going to involve learning about home audits and also learning everything there is to know about heat pump technology. So stay tuned for future deep dives in November and December. And thanks everyone out for coming out and joining us tonight for this discussion.
Remember that if you would like to save the chat, you can click the 3 dots to the right of the bottom of the chat, and you can save the chat to look at it later, see the questions and get some of the links. We'll give you a little bit of time to do that before we shut down the Zoom.
Great. Good Good night, all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting this on. It was just very